Hello and welcome to Snapshot Analysis. My name is Minna Joffrey Lindemulder, and I'm the content manager at the New Lines Institute for Strategy and Policy. Today, I have Alice Hickson with me, a colleague in the Power Vacuums program. Alice and I are going to speak about the impending Ukrainian refugee crisis. Alice, thank you for joining me. Can you tell me about the effect that this refugee crisis is going to have on the EU?
Yeah, thank you, Minna. So since the Russian invasion began, over 11 million people, which is 1/4 of Ukraine's population, have fled their homes in Ukraine, and more than 4.3 million of the 11 million, mostly women and children, have left the country to become refugees in neighboring countries, many of which are EU member states. Now, to put this into context, we have not seen this kind of pace or scale since World War II. The sudden influx of people is having a profound impact on the European landscape. With these massive numbers of refugees, Ukraine's EU neighbors have shown remarkable mobilization and solidarity in welcoming these refugees, keeping their borders open despite the surges. We've really seen an emergence of a pan-European response. However, as these numbers rise and the situation becomes more protracted, the issue of capacity constraints comes into question, with countries like the Czech Republic and the cities of Warsaw in Poland indicating they aren't able to take on any more refugees. Another one of the knock-on effects of this conflict is a market rise in food insecurity, which the EU is attempting to address. While the EU has assigned 500 million euros for humanitarian aid to Ukraine, analysts have suggested that the cost of supporting an estimated 5 million refugees could be 50 billion euros in 2022 alone. The influx is putting considerable strain on border authorities and humanitarian aid agencies, and has raised questions as to how the EU will provide support, both substantive and financial, to all of these refugees.
And you mentioned that a lot of the refugees have been women and children, presumably because Ukrainian men between the ages of 18 and 60, I believe, are not allowed to leave. Do you think that the refugees leaving are under the impression that this is a short-term relocation, or does this feel like a long-term move and shift away from their home country the way that we've seen in Syria and Afghanistan?
Definitely. So in terms of morale, Ukrainian refugees are eager to return home quickly once the war is over, to reunite with family members and friends who are left behind to fight. So like you mentioned, many think this is not a long-term conflict, and they thinking about long-term or permanent resettlement is completely off the table. Like you said, if the situation in Ukraine remains highly volatile, they will be forced to resettle into their new communities, prolonging their lives as migrants. And it is essential that humanitarian aid be structured beyond this emergency response relief to into long-term support for migrants in these protracted situations.
When thinking about the provisions that have been granted to these refugees, we've heard a lot about special work permits and about temporary residency statuses. Can you tell us how this might progress as the war progresses, and how long do you think these will last?
Yeah, so the EU has triggered for the first time that temporary protection directive, which was introduced in 2001 and means that refugees from Ukraine will be granted a temporary residence permit in the EU for up to 3 years. And so this is a historic act of solidarity with refugees. It's not just the right to be there, but it's also additional rights, like the right to healthcare, to work, and to education. Thousands of jobs are being offered to Ukrainian refugees by on-the-ground recruitment agencies, and this form of outreach is happening with a speed and scope that is rare for the European Union. So long-term, these provisions can potentially alter EU member states' labor markets, especially in countries with labor shortages like Lithuania, who see this influx of refugees as a temporary solution to that labor shortage problem. However, the majority of refugees have indicated that they will return to Ukraine when the war is over. So given the levels of ongoing devastation, Ukrainians could be staying in their host countries for some time, and in which case would have to apply for a more permanent residence after the temporary directive is up.
Thank you so much for joining us, Alice. Is there anything else that we need to know about the refugee situation coming out of Ukraine that would be important in the coming weeks as the war progresses?
Yeah, I think it's really up to the EU member states to implement the temporary directive Protection Directive in an effective and inclusive way, and watching for if third-party nationals fleeing Ukraine are receiving the same treatment as Ukrainian nationals in terms of a safe passage into Europe will definitely be something to look for.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Alice. This has been Snapshot Analysis with the New Lines Institute. We will continue to keep you updated on the war in Russia and Ukraine and other geopolitical events. Thank you.